Just taking a minute.
Hmm?
Just taking a minute, hopefully. Oh, there we go. Welcome to Reach Out here on this snowiest of days. Not the end of days, but the end of sunny days here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, at least for the next several days. Welcome once again to the Social Justice Broadcast and Podcast. It is a wide storm. It is an enveloping storm.
5 feet in the Sierras.
Really?
Yeah, 5 feet of
Sierra Nevada.
Oh, yeah, way out there.
This wasn't the same storm, was it?
Yeah, the same storm.
We are getting ripped off.
Yeah, you don't want
We are at the most getting a foot.
Yeah.
And that's a high estimate.
Yeah.
That's rip off. Although in northern PA, they're getting 12 to 18 at least.
Well, that'd make the skiers happy. I mean, I'm sure Round Top is very.
But it's been
celebrating, and
it's been such an abnormally warm winter so far.
how come the picture doesn't move?
Oh, it does eventually. I hope. Okay, I guess it's offline.
Oh.
Good catch. Good catch there.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering.
It should be moving. It says it's just starting. Regardless, I do a backup recording.
They can hear us, right?
No.
No?
No. Regardless, I do a backup recording of both. I've just been lazy in uploading those as the actual show. Because our live stream, and look, we love Derry Street United Methodist Church, current, soon to be former Derry Street United Methodist Church. But sometimes the internet cuts out up here, which is not, great for an internet radio station.
No, that's not a good way to do radio.
No, not really. But, I got the backup video, so
Okay.
I can always post it.
Okay.
But, yeah, so this was quite a week in history. And two of who I would now consider 5 years ago, I didn't know who these people were. And I think that's was bad for me, but it's a pretty good learning curve. And I just encourage people to never stop learning, because even if you think you're an old man in your mid-30s, sorry, that you still have anything to learn. You still have a lot to learn. There's so much out there. And I'm talking today about Rosa Luxemberg and Patrice Lumumba, two, I would call them true revolutionaries in every sense of the word.
Two giants, if we were to tell history correctly, if we were to tell history objectively, if we would tell history without creating a mythological narrative that supports the status quo.
Yeah, that's hard to do, though.
Well, let's keep trying. You say Rosa Luxemburg.
Yeah, she was instrumental in trying to overthrow the German government. I suppose that was after World War One.
I would recommend that people go back and take a look at her writing, what was it, Reform or Revolution? Because that was the question, that was the central question at that time of the socialist or the communist movements in terms of its relationships to the current states, regardless of where they were, and certainly in Germany. Whether or not they should try to overthrow by revolution, or whether or not you could tweak the government through social reform.
And what was her conclusion?
Well, that's why they threw her in the river.
Indeed. And you may notice we're drinking beer today. It's Backseat Burner by, who makes it? I don't know. It's one of my faves. It's by Otter Creek, who I believe is in Oregon. But of course, this was made during the 2016 presidential election, mostly in honor of Bernie Sanders, who I believe would fall into that first camp. He would fall into that camp of, we can reform this system.
We can reform. He's too tweaky.
Yeah.
He thinks he could tweak this and come out right.
I mean, he's so far into it, though, that what other solutions are you going to come to?
Well, he's a part, yeah, of course. I mean, he's tied, he's anchored, But there have been people who have been anchored to a system who had the brain power enough to think themselves out of it. I put a lot, several people. You talking about Patrice Lumumba? He's such a person.
This is the first time I looked with any depth into the circumstances of his life and death. And I mean, his life is pretty inspiring. And a lot of people say, oh, well, he never really had a chance to govern, to muck himself up the way many politicians might. And who knows? But at the same time, he seemed to have a purity of vision.
But why do they say that? What are they trying to say?
They're trying to say that there's no point in trying to change the status quo. You just have to stick on the path. That's what I think they're trying to say.
Is that what they're trying to say? You see, that's the point. I mean, Patrice Lumumba grew out of that. He grew out into recognizing where his country truly was in reality, as opposed to the authoritative narrative that had been forced on Africa, out in the Congo, throughout his childhood and growing up. I mean, who would doubt the authority? Who would doubt the strength and the purpose of those people who had the money and the power and the skin color to rule?
Sure.
You know? And he had to grow into that person to come to understand that, and to understand a very simple thing that we somehow or another, we don't mention. And that is that a nation's resources belong to that nation. It belongs to the people of that nation to develop for their welfare, not for the welfare of colonial powers, be they Belgium or American.
I think that's the most revolutionary statement you can make in a capitalist world, where multinational corporations think and have proven that they can come into a place, buy the resources, and not only steal the resources from the people while giving very little in taxation, but to also use the people to harvest them and to extract them at very little remuneration, often none, often just slave-like remuneration.
Well, look at the overwhelming situation that Patrice Lumumba found himself in. We're talking about colonial Africa. I mean, we're not talking about vestiges of colonialism.
And let's not forget that Africa was quite colonial until the mid-20th century.
It was mid-colonial well after the mid-20th century.
Yeah. And of course, post-colonial era lasts for a while.
And post-colonial era is a lot like the colonial era.
Because it's so fragile. And predatory.
Is it gradual at all?
Oh, no,
I mean,
no, fragile.
Just because, I mean, fragile. You know, I mean, like the French are not in Nigeria, for example, but they control the resources. You know, absence doesn't equal lack of control. You know, and at the time that Patrice Lumumba was coming into his maturity, Belgium dominated Congo. You know, I mean, and let's not forget America.
Oh, absolutely. And you look back to, of course, the famous King Leopold II of Belgium, just horrific. And it's saying something to say that it may be the most horrific example of colonial oppression in Africa.
I don't know about that, but
it may be.
It's one of them, that's for sure.
I've listened to a really good podcast. I must recommend it. It's called Hardcore History by Dan Carlin.
Oh.
And I've been watching, it's like 5-hour episodes. So let's not take a note from that, probably. Maybe, but probably no. But he goes into real depth on these subjects.
Good.
Lately, I've been listening to one on World War I. And he's like, well, he tries to equate all the terrible battles of World War I, like on a scale of horror. And he's like, well, it's hard to do. So like he just equates them like all like as the most horrible.
Yeah.
I think the Battle of the Marne is up there. And also the siege in France. Oh, it's on my mind at the moment. The siege of the ancient city in France during World War I. I'm not thinking of it, but that went on for like 6 months, and it was heavy shelling and just horrific. But actually, the entire Western Front during World War I.
What was the Western Front? It was more than 6 months.
Oh, but some like some battles. Specific battles would persist.
Specific battles along the front that were high marks, you might say.
Absolutely, but like if we're equating like the most terrible colonial presences in Africa and around the world, I think Belgium during that time is on that
Some
level
of them rates
of
pretty
most
high, but
terrible.
I mean, the British and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, let's
Oh,
not
yeah.
let's
Hey,
not.
not denying.
You know, oh my, okay, but
But yeah,
yeah, Patrice Lumumba comes out of this recognizing that his country, and independence and resources belonging to us and future development of our youth to become the future leaders of etc. I mean, those were all a part of what he espoused, what he stood for, and what brought him to the attention.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
hey,
mean,
as I myself have mentioned, that is your greatest resource,
hmm
your people, and of course, like you want to invest in them. And when he's saying, "Oh, we have to found this sense of," I don't know, not good governance, but just faith in
an
institutions.
institution like to create those kinds of institutions. We find that again. Say, for example, when Jerry Rawlings comes into Ghana, the reordering of the institutions to fit the vision. Because absolutely those colonial institutions would not serve a new vision, and consequently, he's going into those institutions so that they could serve the future that he was seeing.
And even in America, a new president might think that he or she can come in and do great things and change everything, but those institutions have so much influence and power that they are really difficult to overcome.
That's very true. I mean, that's why they became institutions. But
Just some of the stuff he said, it was fantastic. We shall see to it that the lands of our native country truly benefit its
right
children.
on.
The challenge was creating a national economy and ensuring our economic independence. Political rights would be reconceived. We shall revise all the old laws and make them into new ones that will be just and noble. Now, that's something that scares colonial powers. And that's something that scares people who like the status quo and how things are, like the United States, which, of course, helped to overthrow him with what's, uh, what's his name? Joseph Mobutu, who served as
Mobutu
dictator for what,
for a
20 or
long
30
time, 30
years
years.
after his death
30 years, supported by us. And of course,
in a
the
brutal,
Belgians in Europe, and
violent, oppressive regime.
of course, because we were interested in the resources, and we were interested in making contracts with a person who we could trust, that we could steal the resources from the people. Exactly the opposite of what Patrice Lumumba was all about. But the thing that I want to point out while you're talking about that is, look at the methodology that we used. Okay, we created an opposition and then supported that opposition in Joseph Mobutu. You understand? Uh, he was a candidate because he had our backing. He wasn't a candidate because of his own strength. You understand? We made him the opposition
Yeah.
because we could control him, bringing him into power.
We at least thought we could control them. And that's what gets me
Well,
about
we
so
did.
many of these colonial rulers that we appoint. And I'm sure we might have controlled him, but a lot of them we
Oh,
can't
sure.
control.
No, well, look, the reason I say this, look, right now we have Venezuela. I don't want to digress too much, but while we're talking history lesson, I say you take history and you apply it to today. The methodology was to create an opposition and run that opposition against what was the legitimate government in Patrice Lumumba. We have in Venezuela a man who was elected by the people for the second time as a legitimate government. But what did we announce the other day? We announced that we will support the opposition, as if the day that he was sworn in, if on the day that Donald Trump was sworn in, the European Union or somebody would have stood up and said, we're not going to recognize Donald Trump, we're going to recognize Hillary Clinton.
How about that?
You know, this is what we are doing in Venezuela. We're not going to recognize the duly elected, sworn in president. We're going to suggest, we're going to put into power the man who was his opposition, as
God,
was Hillary Clinton.
if only they would have done that. You know?
You know, boy, uh, we're doing the same thing all over again. And you can go and you can look again and again and again and find this methodology that we raise an opposition, we support an opposition, and then we oppose the person who is in power and find reasons that that opposition, should become the ruler.
Isn't that one of the primary courses of madness? That we keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
And over. Yeah, well,
The world knows, the world understands what we do and who we are much better than our population does.
well, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely true. And also, I think the world is coming to a point where they're starting to judge us by our friends. You know, the newly elected right wing killing maniac in Brazil is a staunch supporter of the opposition and is going to do everything that he can in Venezuela to support our position. You understand?
Bolsonaro is a real.
He's our friend. Yeah, Saudi Arabia is our friend. Israel is our friend. When you start being judged by the company you keep, remember who our friends are.
And there are those who would say, according to what you said, that makes you anti-Semitic. And I feel like that is untrue. I feel like to make accurate criticisms of Israel is not in and of itself anti-Semitic. I think we all need to be held up to a higher standard and to be judged clearly.
Look, if anybody can suggest that what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is correct, is upstanding, is something that it should not be criticized. If that's your position, then, sir, I have a question about you. All right? If you could see what these people do day after day, and the people who they keep in the world's, what do they call it, largest open-air prison, 97% of the water, which is undrinkable, and the kids who you want to die, who you want to let slowly die, not to mention the ones you shoot.
Yeah.
If you can accept that, if you think that's okay as a policy of a country, then go for it, brother. Go for it. But take a look at yourself in the mirror because you preach insanity. Now, if you want to make a rationalization that to criticize this behavior is anti-Semitic, then fine. But understand that you are rationalizing. You're not making a statement that you yourself can even believe. Because I'm criticizing a behavior and you're telling me about a religion.
And we don't have it on our list of topics today, but we've talked a lot about the anti-BDS, which of course is boycott, divestment, and sanction laws that are present in over half of these states in the United States right now. And there's also a possible national law in the works, which makes it illegal to criticize or to boycott, divest, or sanction Israel for their treatment of the Palestinians. And I can't help but say that that's just a full violation of the First Amendment. And many people say the same thing. But other people are like, oh, we must be a friend to Israel.
Hey, go and be a friend to Israel. If you're a friend to Israel, you would criticize your friend when your friend is wrong. If you are a enabler of bad behavior, then you go and you support your friend for anything that they do. The choice is yours. If you are truly a friend, correct them when they're wrong.
No, and that's what it should be about, right? So that should be the point.
If you are intending to live justly in this world, then it doesn't make a difference whether or not you are looking at a friend or a foe when you're looking at a behavior. Hopefully you have picked your friends because of good behavior, but if they do things that are not, then out of friendship, it is your, not only your right, but I think it's your obligation to pull your friend aside and whisper in her ear.
And if they don't listen to speak it to the world, I mean, I think a good process
You got to
is
stand
always
up.
bring it to them first, but
Yeah,
then if they
no.
don't listen,
You got to stand up. If you don't stand up for right and justice, then who are you? You know, uh, we have to stand up. You know, regardless of where the shoe falls. Yeah, and if you speak out wrongly, don't worry, somebody will correct you. You
I
know.
mean, yeah.
So don't worry, speak up. But don't stop listening. You never stop listening. You know. I want to, if this is okay, to talk about the crickets.
Oh, do you mean the crickets going extinct around the world due to global warming and pollution and chemicals and all that? Is
Oh
that what you're
no,
talking about?
not those crickets,
That's
but
true.
that's a good point.
It's true though.
Let me refresh people's memories. You know, a couple of months back, we talked about this story, and other people, of course, in this country talked about this story. As a matter of fact, you couldn't escape this story if you watched the commercial news.
No, this was wild. This story was wild.
This was that they were taking some kind of acoustic weapon and using it against the American embassy, newly staffed, in Cuba. Now, the Cubans had come to a point where sanctions were being removed and there was a thaw in the relationship and things were going along just fine. But being crazy Cubans, obviously they couldn't accept that things were working out. So they came up with this method of acoustically attacking the American embassy. You remember that story? Ambassadors and I guess staff getting sick to a point where they couldn't remember words. You know, getting sick to a point that their knees were weak and they couldn't stand up and they got massive headaches. They came on the air and told us that the Cubans were deliberately attacking our embassy and certain rooms and certain staff members. And people were falling like flies. Then came another story that this same thing was happening in Uzbekistan or someplace. You know, and another American embassy was attacked with this same acoustical weapon. And lo and behold, CBS, NBC in particular, those two announced that night that their sources said that these weapons came from Russia.
Of course.
Russia. Russia was teaching the Cubans how to give Americans headaches with acoustical weapons. In one article I read, in one newspaper, I think it was the NYT, the doctor that they interviewed who was supposed to substantiate this said that it was scientifically impossible for some low-level sound to cause these symptoms that they are talking about. But they went out and found a tourist who had these tingling sensations go through his toes, up his ankle and up his knee, and throughout his fingers. And this was caused by the Russian weapon. Now,
Okay. No, it all sounds pretty solid.
Okay.
So I feel like
Okay.
this is Russia, right?
right, Russia is like that, you know? And this is the point. Because I want everybody to think of these stories. And I want you to think of what that says to your understanding of the geopolitical narrative that's taking place in this world. Russia is bad, we're good, they're trying to harm us, and this is consistent, and here is another example of it. That was front page, ladies and gentlemen, for days. It was the first story on national news for days. And it came back a couple of days after you thought it had died, and a couple of weeks after you thought it was really dead.
Because it's interesting, the idea of this new sonic weapon. Like, it's a really interesting idea.
Yes. Okay, we're here with the update. Here's the update. And we have to give you the update because you don't see it on the CBS and NBC and or what is it, MSNBC and all those stations that told you that the Russians were doing this dastardly deed over and over again. Now they won't give you the update.
It's almost as if they want war between the U.S. and Russia. Interesting. We'll get into that a little more later. The idea that somehow liberals are peaceniks, which is
yeah,
not
okay.
the case.
Scientists have discovered the source of these acoustical sensations that were experienced by our staff, by our embassy staffs. They've gone to the heart of the matter, and they have absolutely proven that the sound was caused by crickets. It is the answering sound to the mating call of the, I had the name of the cricket someplace down here, and if I find it, I will tell you, but it has something Asian in it. Cricket, and it's a short-legged cricket of some kind, you know. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not a Russian tactic that was taught to the Cubans. This is a matter of nature. This is a matter of mating among the insects. This is a good thing. This is a beautiful thing when you tell your kids the stories of the birds and the bees and how life works and the wonders and the magic of life coming into being. You can tell them of these crickets that make these sounds in the night so that they can locate each other for possible mating.
But Bill, here's my question. What if they were Russian crickets? Genetically engineered by the Russians to attack us with their mating sounds.
You know what that question reminds me of? The reason, and it's given in these articles, you go back and read them, that we believe the Russians were working on this kind of system is because we were. It's called projection. You know, we are the CIA that works on mind control. We are the CIA that developed the LSD and had agents jump out of hotel windows when they didn't know they were on the substance, you know.
There's a really good Netflix special on that. You gotta get Netflix, man. I don't know. I'm sorry. I suppose I shouldn't really be shilling for corporate interests in this show. Sorry, but it's very good anyway.
Yeah. But this is what we do, and we project it onto somebody else. I mean, there was nothing. There was no evidence. There was nothing that said that the Russians were even thinking about doing such a thing, and we can't go back and find some whatever scientist in Russia or body who was thinking this way. But we can in our own CIA, because we were trying to develop a weapon that would do what we say these crickets were doing.
Well, I have no doubt that we have developed that weapon, but I also don't doubt that any number of other people have it. It's probably true, but that doesn't mean they used it here.
No, but remember what we came to in our acoustical attacks? We came to loud noise. We came to what we did in Panama. Remember how we came out of this whole experiment by giving white sound and rock music.
I always found very interesting when we saw these monoliths of ancient cultures that oftentimes they were sound chambers. I think there is a lot of power in sound.
There's a lot of power.
I think you can do more than just blast people with loud noise.
Well, that's like, what is that? Explain the Battle of Jericho?
For real though. For real.
Well,
hey, maybe.
I mean, there's an explanation about the being signals of some kind too. People hidden in between the walls. I don't know, but
maybe it was aliens. No, we got to get into that one day too. The idea of ascribing all the prowess and discoveries of ancient civilizations to aliens. Although I think it's a really fun show. I like it. It's a fun ride.
It's a fun ride. Okay.
I feel like ancient cultures really are a lot more intelligent than we think.
You know what we like to think is that we are smarter than everybody else. even our older selves, you know. We like to think that mankind started out dumb, and every year that goes by, we get smarter.
I mean, have you watched us lately? We're definitely not getting smarter.
Right. I mean, I agree. I mean, ancient men was just as smart as we are, and smarter about some things that we forgot.
God, look
You
at
know,
I think they discovered trigonometry
well, they
thousands of
discovered,
years
sure.
before that we even thought they
Yeah,
had.
they were doing-
And to discover that out of nothing, and just with no frame of reference,
Right.
that's remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, all the stuff that's come down to us, but and things that are forgotten, things that are forgotten. You know, I mean, we don't know anything about botany like the old. When I was in Africa and I used to go out in the bush, and the young kids, the little kids, would say, they used to call me Manolito. They said, Manolito, that's the one when you have the cough, you go over there and you get that one. You know, you boil that one. You know, that's the one when you had that itch thing, you melt that and you rub that on you. I mean, they knew the pharmacology of the forest. You know, but we had forgotten. I mean, our drugstore says aspirin beer.
But forest pharmacology is a lot more difficult to synthesize
Oh,
and to
but
make money from.
But what we have
the
to know,
forest.
but what we have to know as individuals, it's very different than what they had to know as individuals. So there's a lot of forgotten stuff, and there's a lot of forgotten stuff that was. Here's my mother went to the doctor because she had a boil under her arm, and the doctor, a older guy, he said, "We'll come back next week and we'll cut it out." You know, and she went back and she raised her arm, and they cut it out, and she went home and she was sore for a couple of days, and she had to change the bandages and stuff. And
Yeah, it can get really easily infected.
And it got better. Okay, but lo and behold, the next year she had a boil under the other arm, and she went to a younger doctor, interestingly. And I said that interestingly, and he says, "Oh, that's a boil under your arm. I tell you what you do. You go home and you tie a string around it, and it'll go away." My mother said, "That's what my grandmother used to tell me. That's what my grandmother used to do." He said, "Your grandmother was right. You tie a string around it, cuts off the blood supply, it atrophies, dies."
Wow.
Okay? Okay? The modern surgeon thinks in terms of the knife, but there's a whole knowledge of medicine before the knife.
And hey, some of it was terrible. Let's not get
no.
that twisted. Some of it was, but a lot of it worked.
The reason it came down to her grandmother was because it worked. You know,
I feel like things like leeches were on that parallel.
I think y'all had the leeches. I don't want to go that way. That was a European thing to use leeches and bleeding.
What'd y'all do?
I didn't hear.
I don't know.
I never heard of anybody doing leeches. You know, I did hear people doing brain surgery, but I mean,
with the drills,
yeah,
or the sticks.
Yeah.
We did that until the early 20th century, though.
Yeah.
Prefrontal lobotomies.
Man, oh man.
Yep.
Well,
we messed up.
As a matter of fact, there's still some lobotomy kind of things going on now. You know, I mean, that thinking isn't completely dead.
Oh, wasn't it Joe Kennedy's daughter who had that prefrontal lobotomy?
Boy, that was one of the terrible
ruin
stories.
Their political careers.
That was one of the terrible stories. There was a child that they put away and never brought to mind.
And there's no proof that she even would have ruined anyone's political career.
For crying out loud. Oh, come on.
Even
please.
if so. Look, even
I
if
mean,
so,
yeah.
that's preposterous.
Yeah.
But is it being Machiavellian for the sake of nothing?
That we should come around to this kind of a world, you know, and it's a good thing that you brought that up because this is what we're talking about, politics, you know, and financial. You know, these are the two aspects of life that dominate everything anymore. When we were talking, you mentioned that the Democrats were more in favor of war. We'll come around to talking about that in more detail, but the fact is that Democrats more favor war than Republicans now, especially since Trump announced pulling out of Syria.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is that when Obama was president and he was talking about pulling out of Afghanistan, the Democrats were more in favor of pulling out. and not remaining in these wars. In other words, what I'm saying is that we're not making our decisions anymore on the basis of understanding our morality, even our philosophy, any of the deep thoughts that affect our conscience. We're making these decisions on what party we belong to and what the leaders of that party tell us.
It's very tribal. It's very us versus them. It's all about winning and not about substance.
And it's anti-democratic. It's anti-everything because democracy depends on the individual being a well-informed individual who goes out and casts a responsible vote.
And yes, lawmakers are all about capitalism until it comes to major corporations, and they're all about giving handouts. So we are awash in these contradictions.
Talk about those contradictions. You have here MLK Jr.
I titled this MLK Jr. The Socialist, which seems accurate to me.
The Socialist. You're talking about this woman up here, Luxemberg,
Rosa Luxemberg.
And she talked about whether or not there should be revolution or reform, and they defeated her by killing her, and they defeated the modicum revolution that was taking place, that little part of the revolutionaries that was rising up in different places. They killed that.
And it's easy to kill one person.
And we sent troops into Russia to put down that whole thing. You remember 17 nations attacked Russia. And then they killed her. I mean, they killed individuals here and there, including her. So we didn't have the revolution.
So it's not.
So then we come to Martin Luther King. Yeah, and how does he come to socialism?
Well, just firstly, you can't really have a great deal of faith in your own system if you are so deathly scared of any other competing system even existing.
We have this thing here where we talked about crickets, and we talked about the media telling you one story and allowing that story to be your perspective, even though the truth has become known. And you're not, therefore, re-informed as to what is the truth. And because we no longer look for these things ourselves, we never come to know and never come to change our perspective, you know. And this is true in the larger sense when we talk about capitalism and socialism. You know, we have a new, what's it called? We have a new app that's going into all the libraries.
Yeah, what is this? I was unfamiliar when you listed it.
Oh, it's, what's the name of it? It's here,
it's pretty early on. It's just the one-liner.
Yeah.
The NewsGuard app.
NewsGuard, that's it, NewsGuard. NewsGuard. You remember Tom Ridge?
Oh, with all my heart.
Tom Ridge was the former governor of Pennsylvania, of our state. And he also was the one of the early heads, if not the first head of the...
I think he was the first head of the Department of Homeland Security.
Of Homeland Security. Okay, then he was the one who came up with these red and green and yellow alerts. Remember those?
Oh, we're just constantly on a yellow or orange alert.
Well, okay.
That was part of the beauty of the system. Like, it's never going to go to green.
Okay.
It will never go to green.
Well, this same Tom Ridge is on the board of the people who brought into existence this app.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And along with some ex-CIA guys and NATO guys, and, you know, like the same thing like the Atlantic Council kind of construction in terms of the people.
Terrific.
Okay? Now, there is no choice about this thing. This thing is being foisted on everyone. What they are doing, these people, this board of people, and all of them people like Tom Ridge, you know, and Brennan, all of them people like that, are telling us this news agency has a green light, i.e. the New York Times. This one has a yellow light, and I don't know who fits into that category, you know. But I know who fits into the red light category. I mean, like the Intercept or or RT or any of the
All right.
alternative news sources fit into the red zone.
I don't know about HuffPost. Definitely RT. Definitely Pravda. And God, maybe even places like the Intercept.
Definitely the Intercept. Definitely the Intercept.
I don't know about HuffPost because that's liberal enough to still be
There are
okay.
times when it goes over that red line,
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, but but these people are deciding for you which news you will see, which stories you will hear.
That's okay.
In terms of all the official sources like libraries, and even I bet you they're going to appear on your home computers when you buy them as a default.
Definitely on here.
Hey,
Because right now I
yeah,
got about 20 things on here I don't even want, and I can't get rid of them.
uh huh, uh huh. Okay, now we're talking about people controlling the information that you get, so you'll never know about the crickets. You know, controlling the sources that you could use, so you'll never know about alternative news.
Sure.
Like people who tell you about police brutality, we take them off the app. Right? I mean, right away. Remember what we did at Facebook?
That was a purge, and these were sites that are like police the police. These were accurate stories. These
Right.
were stories that people just posted themselves, and you can see the level of suppression that's coming towards independent journalism because it is not under the thumb of any authorities.
Okay. Yeah, here's what we did with Martin Luther King Jr. We had a 10-year argument about making him an American hero. You know, what's his name? Diamonds in the Sky.
Stevie Wonder.
Stevie Wonder. You know, that's the Stevie Wonder holiday.
And of course, that was opposed by Joe Biden, but regardless.
Okay. But the Martin Luther King who we celebrate is the sanitized Martin Luther King. You know, this is the Martin Luther King who had a dream. And basically, that's the only Martin Luther King that we hear about. The Martin Luther King who gave this speech that you're talking about here, Beyond Vietnam. Martin Luther King, who you have here listed as a socialist. That's not the Martin Luther King that we celebrate.
And read some of his early writings. People often say that he only became a socialist at the end of his life. I don't believe that to be true. Some of his early writings are pretty bold in that way.
He came to socialism through Christianity. This is your question about Christianity and socialism.
Yeah.
But he came to socialism because of his readings of the writings of those people who were highly Christian in their theologies, you know, and he quotes them. He talks about them, you know, and it's not simply by circumstance. It's not simply because he heard a word in church. It's because he was a real scholar.
But also, though, because he saw his people being oppressed and felt that oppression.
And he applied scholarship to it. You know, this is the amazing thing about him. It's his ability to stand back and describe a situation in such magnificence and detail at the same time. You know, and one of the things that he described, of course, was what happens to a nation's resources when you spend them all on war as opposed to spending them on programs of social justice.
We butcher this quote all the time. So I wanted to get it accurate this time on the commemoration of his, it's his birthday, right? Not his assassination.
Yes.
It is a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And I know we have tried to steer away from using the word defense in terms of military spending, but that's what he said. So, whatever. Yeah. But that's the quote, and I think it's more relevant today than it's ever been because we are in it. We are in that stage.
Well, we're actually so far into that stage that we have lost as a society already. And as the days and minutes and hours go by, we're getting more and more on the losing side. The reason I say that, same reason I'm talking about these Dems. We don't mind $700 billion and more, $1 trillion for war. But every time we talk about building a school, it becomes an argument. Every time we talk about needing a bridge, we don't know where the money is coming from. But if I say aircraft carrier, go ahead. It's built without a question. It's built without a doubt.
Yes. But what gets me is it's so exceptionally short-sighted by these big-time Mahaff capitalists. You need the bridges for your goods to be transported by truck across the country. You need the infrastructure for that as much as anybody. And you know it's not going to come mostly from your pockets. It's going to come from the pockets of the people. So why do you oppose infrastructure spending? It blows my mind, except if you are so predatory and so greedy that you just must extract every penny from your immediate circumstance and not be able to see even 5 feet in front of your face.
Well, Justin, I don't want to break it to you, but we are a failed nation.
It's what
We are a failed nation. Not going to fail, not in the process of failing, not maybe we will fail tomorrow. We are a failed nation. No matter what we say today will not change this situation tomorrow. One of the things, for example, that's being touted right now is that there are 4 women who are the CEOs of the major weapons producers.
Yay.
This is being touted as a wonderful opportunity to break the glass ceiling for women. In other words, women, you can become as nasty as a man. It's all open to you now. Arm yourself. Kill people around the world. Promote weapons, promote airplanes and aircraft carriers and bombs, and you can succeed like a man. So you are blessed here in America.
And they're cool with you.
Don't try to do that with being a woman in Planned Parenthood, but
right. And they're cool with you for the most part, as long as you follow that mold.
As
long as you fit that vision.
You got to do the same thing they do. I mean, if you go to the John, you got to stand up. I mean, that's just the way it is. If you're going to the boardroom, you're just another guy at the meeting. And if you exhibit something other than that, then you're out. Whether or not they accept you as being the Negro or the woman or the what. In order for you to get into that boardroom, you have to inculcate the same nasty disposition as all the rest of them.
And that's what so many had hoped would alleviate just the, I don't know if you want to call it toxic masculinity or what. That's what Gillette called it.
That's what Gillette called it. God bless Gillette, but go ahead.
Well,
it ain't going to work.
That's probably the only time I've ever heard anyone say that and be serious about
it. The thing about Gillette, I mean, look, who is advertising their razor blades? These women with the skimpy little...
Yeah. That's a Robert Kraft joint, right?
Yeah,
Owner of the Patriots?
Yeah.
That's why they call it Gillette Stadium?
Right, yeah.
Not just because that's the name of the town?
Right.
Of course, if it was the name of the town, he probably built the town.
Yeah, but that's the point. I mean...
Oh, it's Foxborough.
It's like we'll do for money. We'll say and do anything for money.
Yeah.
And we'll let women into any field where it proves an opportunity for us to just do a little PR, continue to make money the same way that we're making money. In other words, I'm saying this is all a fait accompli. We're talking about the Democrats. The Democrats have already put a couple $100,000 into right-wing organizations so that they could be on the same boards and same disposition as the neocons.
Sure.
You know, that doesn't say that this thing is going to end tomorrow. This says that it's going to continue ad infinitum. That this is the future. That Democrats and Republicans will combine on issues of war, and women, y'all are welcome too. I can remember, I was saying, yeah, let women into the army because then we'll be more considerate when we talk about going to war. And then the women stood up and said, I want to be a paratrooper. I want to shoot somebody. And I said, well, okay. Same difference. War is war, no matter who wages it.
Yeah.
You know, war is war. And a country is corrupt in the sense that Martin Luther King is talking about a country who spends more on its military weaponry than it does on programs of social uplift. We have passed that threshold a long time ago. And there's nothing, absolutely nothing, that is going to change it.
We, as a nation, have experienced that spiritual death. We are dead inside, whether you believe in God or not. Call it what you will. But that sort of ethical core is nowhere to be found.
Look, there's one thing, and I don't know how many churches talk about. When the evening came, he went higher up on the mountain, and he delivered to the people a sermon which we call the Beatitudes. And my most favorite part of the Beatitudes is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God.
Well, we're very lucky then, Bill, that peace is our profession in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know there are actually a ton of people who did think somehow in a twisted way, and I know several of them. Unfortunately, several of them are in your generation. Is that you need those 1,000 or multiple thousands of nuclear warheads in order to ensure peace around the world? That's madness.
That's rationalization. What we're saying is that we want power. What we're saying right now in getting rid of the INF agreement, you know, the treaty that we're destroying with Russia now, with respect to intermediate nuclear range missiles, which probably should include new weapons now, and new countries now, instead of being cast aside. But the reason that we are doing it is very clearly stated by Pompous. He says that we want to attain nuclear superiority.
What? Bill.
Hey, I'm telling you what the man said, okay? I'm just telling you what the man said.
Nuclear superiority.
We want to obtain nuclear superiority.
We've never not had
I understand that, but I'm telling you the mindset of our leadership.
Killing me.
That you should even entertain that you don't want peace, you prefer to have nuclear superiority. For you to say that the goal of your nation is not seeking peace in the world, but to have nuclear superiority. This is a statement from our leadership. But listen, when Pompeo opened his speech in Cairo, and I'm talking now about Christianity and imperialism, he said in Cairo, the first sentence he said was that I keep an open Bible on my desk. You know, this is what he said to a Muslim country.
Yeah.
But
just in case they didn't know what was up, they now knew what was up.
You know, hey, he didn't say nothing about the Crusades at the time. You understand?
All he would have said was, "We won." Haha, gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have been his.
Clinton said, I asked God if I should bomb Serbia.
God said, yup.
God said, go ahead. Must have said go ahead, because that's what we did. We bombed the heck out of Serbia. You know, I mean, we didn't even understand in this country. I mean, none of us. And I bet you to this day, we don't understand. who was this, the Serbs, and where did they fit into the Yugoslavian situation, and what was this Kosovo thing about, and to try to understand that situation with some kind of clarity before we bomb somebody.
It's never stopped us before.
Right on. He asked God, and God said, "Go to it, Bill." H.W. Bush.
He clearly believes in a more Old Testament style of Jehovah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That kind of fire and brimstone just raining down.
Well, you have to. There's a good series, a good documentary series on the wars. That Israel, that not before it became Israel, that the Jews fought on their way to Israel. Jericho, etc. There were a lot of wars that they fought. There was a lot of salting of the earth. There was a lot of killing of the infants. There was a lot of relationship between our God is God because we can kill you and you can't kill us, because we can destroy your nation. Our God is stronger and better than your God. That was a notion of God.
So that's just what it's all about?
That was a clear notion of God that you can read specifically in the Old Testament.
So it's about force.
It was about our God being the stronger God, and I could call on him to destroy you. When you call on God to destroy, I mean, even in the most sacred sense, the most simple sense, that God parts with water, and then your enemy get into the water and he unparts it.
Pretty cool, though.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Parting the Red Sea.
If you leave out, the certain that it wasn't the Red Sea, and
come on, it's more fun if it's the Red Sea.
That we're talking about tides and stuff, but we won't go into that. But we're going to leave it as it is. H.W. Bush said, "I prayed for God before I bombed Iraq, and God told me yes." Before he bombed Iraq, H.W. Bush said he talked to God, and God told him to go ahead and destroy that country and starve all those children.
So here's the thought. I'm not even saying that an individual cannot have communion with God or with the divine or whatever. I'm not saying that can't be the case, although I differ with a lot of my peers in that regard. I can't say that isn't the case, but is it not also extremely, extremely possible that when you sit down and pray, the response that you hear is just what's being confirmed in your own mind. It's just what you wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah.
Just coming right back to you.
Right.
So I don't doubt that a man like him would sit down and pray, but I feel like if you're that, and I'm just spitballing here, that sort of man is that lost in self that he would hear that coming right back to him. And that's very possible.
I don't even believe that.
You don't think he prayed?
No, I don't think he prayed. I am more Machiavellian in my understanding of leadership and my understanding of politicians and the devices that they use. And for a politician, God is just another device. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, true.
There are some, I guess, here and there, maybe whoever, whatever. But when they use God in politics, they're using God in politics.
That's what I'm saying. A true believer of the faith could be that and not say a word about it. That to me would be a much better indicator that they were actually of the faith.
If they were sleeping and God woke them up and said, "Go bomb Serbia," if they didn't have the question already in their mind, "God, should I bomb Serbia?" I'm listening, God. Oh, he must have said yeah.
So, but then the question remains, if not for your own political benefit, why even mention it? Because it's for your own political benefit.
It's because you have a so-called Christian country, and you want to justify something that somewhere there will be some resistance, and you want to overcome that resistance. When you sell something, for example, over the phone, it's not a question of giving them a sales spiel and motivating them to buy. It's a question of overcoming their objections, because you're asking somebody to spend some money, And objectively, they will say, well, I can't go in my pocket and take my money out and give it to you. I mean, there's already a resistance. And you have to be able to anticipate what their objections are going to be. And so this sales spiel that you write is just a process of taking objection number one, objection number two, objection number three, and overcoming those objections so that by the time you're done with your little speech, they're left with nothing but, oh, okay, impossible agreement. But it's overcoming objections. It's not selling a product, it's overcoming their objections to it. That is the real way of selling. And so these politicians, they know the objections. You know, a Christian person is going to stand up there and say, "Thou shalt not kill." And before that person can say that, he says, "I prayed last night, and God told me it's all right."
Oh, that's a relief then.
Right, exactly.
I feel better about
You
it.
see that? I overcame your objection, and I didn't even have to.
And there's a big group of people in America who are definitely comforted by such things.
Yes, yes, absolutely. You know, and they don't have to believe it; they just have to hear it because they're not going to think about it. Once they hear it, it's just a relief. And this is where we, as Americans, have to correct ourselves. We have to start thinking.
And I think this is a great segue to what I want to talk about for several weeks now, but we didn't quite have it fleshed out enough to really get into. Just the question of, do Christianity and socialism mix? And I think we need to look no further than liberation theology in South America to get a really good start to that question. I mean, really, you could read the Bible and certain parts, for instance, the Beatitudes, like you were saying, and realize that, yes, that was the prime part and the core of the teachings of Jesus.
Can I say this before you say that? Is that what we've had to do is overcome Christianity, remove the objections that Christians would raise, you know, in order to become capitalists, in order for them to accept capitalists. You're talking to a guy, and he heard Jesus say, well, you know, a rich man would have a better chance of going through a camel has a better chance of going through the eye of a needle than a rich man of entering heaven. Now, that's kind of a major statement, you know, about rich people in general. You know, the person who's up there as a capitalist, as the ultimate capitalist, he has to overcome that. He can't allow you to run around thinking like that. He has to develop a consequential new theology. And it leads all the way up to prosperity theology, the total takeover of the socialism that Jesus espoused.
And you look in places like Brazil, and one of Bolsonaro's main mentors and inspirers, he is just a nationwide and even continent-wide proponent of that sort of prosperity gospel. And look, if you're in America right now, you are very familiar with the prosperity gospel. You probably heard it. You probably wandered into a church and just like, I'll sit here and I'll listen, and you probably heard it. You probably heard that, you know, you are shown to be closer to God and to be more devout and holy by how much you have, by how much God gives you.
Yeah.
And that it's no sin to be rich is, I think, the
It's
main...
the opposite. Yeah, as a matter of fact, this theology goes way, way, way. I mean, it's not like it's new, okay? One of the ways that rich people in America here, when we had the age of conspicuous consumption, the justification for their richness was that God rewarded them for their industriousness. And he didn't reward the other guy. You understand? There's always been this rationalization to the masses that I'm rich because God approves of me.
It's interesting how it always just reinforces what you already have, so you never have to change.
Well, it's interesting how if you go back to before God was God, in the Roman times or whatnot. Where they had a multiplicity of gods and all that kind of thing. This was still the case. I'm rewarded because of my God, or because of my belief in Athena, because of my belief in Zeus. You know, even arguing against the multiplicity of gods and saying my God is stronger than Athena because my God is Diane. I mean, and therefore, but always, you have a problem when you are rich and your neighbors around you are poor. You always have a problem.
It's much like the guy or woman, whatever, who goes off somewhere, be they famous or an actor or just, through whatever means, it doesn't matter, gets rich and then comes back to their hometown where everyone else is still poor. And they walk around in their luxury and these things that have been put forth to those people as being superior and to being that next level, and just feeling that disdain and say, like, why are these people hating me?
Well,
they're jealous.
Even worse. Even worse.
There's worse.
Sure, because you know what you did to get there. The person you're talking about, okay, he's an actor, he's an entertainer. People bought tickets. Mm-hmm. But suppose you're a slave owner. Suppose you got rich because you took the pineapples from Queen Wonka in Hawaii.
Suppose you're the CEO of Nestle.
The CEO of Nestle, right?
I think that's one of the more evil people
you run
on the
United
planet.
Fruit. I mean, these are the people who are saying that they are endowed by God. You understand? Because there's some severe, it's very, very severe inequalities that's going on around them, and they know what they did to get there. There's no reason why a slave owner should have. Why should he have a good night's sleep? You understand? The only reason he has a good night's sleep is because he said, God gave me these slaves. God said the white man should take care of the black man. This is the white man's burden that I'm taking on.
Wow, Rudyard Kipling.
Is that the ultimate justification?
I thought the first time I read it, I thought he was writing it ironically.
No.
I thought he was being, in that sort of social criticism sense. I did not think he was serious.
Well,
oh, God. The Jungle Book.
Okay, yeah, right.
Come on now.
But isn't that the ultimate suggestion of what you're saying? I mean, he's there because God rewarded him. Why? Because God made him this grandiose person. He made him this very smart person. He made him this very sly person, And he didn't make those natives as smart as he.
Savages.
Savages as civilized as he. Well, they don't even know to stop and drink tea.
Brought to them by the natives and the savages who, if they dropped the tea, would be summarily dismembered.
Yeah.
Because they are nothing.
Then,
but you're a proud Christian.
Then you have to believe that God put you there. I mean, why else would you be able to do these things, to other human beings? I mean, if you saw them, one, as human beings, and two, I mean, your ability to abuse.
Yeah, and I think this very much fits one of the notes I have here. It's very much just a factor of control, a way to control the masses, a way to say, well, this is what God wants you to do, so just stay in line and don't complain. And it's okay if you're poor because that's how God wants it. But it's okay if I'm rich because I am holy and devout and I deserve it because God said that I do.
And you have to overcome tribalism, because we all started in tribes, and tribes obviously have to work together. But then when you start getting a certain kind of leadership, and I can't say when you start getting leadership, because when we had, for example, American Indians, if you became a chief, you gave up everything, and you were there truly as a servant to the people. But in the European sense, if you became the chief, the people weren't servant to you.
You get everything.
You get it, yeah.
Look at the British Crown. Perhaps still one of the largest landowners on the planet.
Yeah.
Look at the Catholic Church.
Hey.
If we're talking about Christianity, let's talk about the Catholic Church, one of the truly richest, wealthiest bodies on the planet.
And I would say, really,
One of
even
the
in a
most-
criminal sense, most corrupt.
One of the most tawdry and most corrupt.
And
using that hierarchical power
and historically so.
to do what they want.
Historically so. You know, I mean,
And I read something. It's going to be like a main story, but I'll just summarize it here. That I think every cardinal in America is facing charges. Nearly every cardinal in America is facing those charges of cover-ups about the child sex abuse scandal.
you know, what I believe truly is that the Catholic Church is a cult. I believe that this has always been a part of the cult practice. Going all the way back, and this is a part of the church secrets. The church has always had this going on, and the church has always covered it up, and it's always been a practice of the church. Which means that you bring initiates into it who learn it within the church.
You believe it's taught?
Obviously. Look, when you can go back to church records for I don't know how many years you want to go and see that this thing has been going on, and people they've been using the same methodology of shifting people all around, for example. You could do it in France and they shipped them to Africa. You could do it in Italy and they shipped them to South America. You understand? No matter what country you go to, no matter what time period you go to, you find that 6% of the Catholic priests are pedophiles.
Wow.
And that's consistent. And it's official. Because it's in the records. Because the bishops learn how to respond to it. Because the church has a particular apparatus that responds to it. It's institutionalized.
Like what we've been talking about all day, the idea of the immense power of institutions. And especially one like the Catholic Church, which is so steeped in history and power and wealth, that they can do pretty much whatever they want and cover it up to whatever extent they want.
So what we are doing now is discovering the tip of an iceberg and thinking that that's the story. The story is the whole history of the Catholic Church and the whole institutionalization of pedophilery within that church. It's not a story of a crime today, of a priest today, of a bishop today. It's a historic reality of the whole church. The whole church. That's why I use the word cult.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We always hear about religion being the opiate of the masses, and they just pass that around nonchalantly. But like I was saying, I think that's just they're referring to the idea that that's what elites use to control the people. And I think that was a huge problem in Europe and Russia. That was big.
When we did our colonization of the world, whether or not it was in China or Africa or Japan or wherever, who was the first people we sent besides soldiers? The missionaries.
Yep.
You know? The missionaries told the little girls that they had to cover up their breasts, that they couldn't do that certain dance.
I wonder why.
We found ways of accusing people of sin and therefore taking control over them.
So,
because we know we are the moral ones, and they have to imitate our way.
You've heard of the psychological concept of projection.
Yes.
That rings very true to me, what they're saying here.
Oh, well.
The idea that these religious officials came and saw this, and they saw that in themselves, and like, ooh, that's sin. Even though they come to a culture where it's not sexualized. It's just a fact of life. It's a very natural thing.
When I was in the villages, women ran around topless. We would call it topless. They ran around just the way they run around, And nobody ever paid attention. You bring an American into the village, he goes, ooh, look at those, look at I mean, for crying out loud. those things are wonderful. They're beautiful. They give form and shape and whatnot. And you see the attractiveness of a woman when you see her whole form, and you have to recognize that as truly a thing of beauty.
Sure.
And it's also a functional thing that they're there for. They're much better to carry milk bottles around, and they're easier to take on picnics, and you don't need refrigeration and a lot of advantages besides carrying immunities and things like that, and preventing a woman from getting pregnant over as long as she's lactating.
Sure.
There's some good natural reasons, and there's some good beautiful reasons, and then they do have a sexual aspect too. And at that time, they are a delight, But there's all three, at least, of those aspects to them: their beauty, their utility, and their sexuality. Knowing which time is which time, and being a person who is into being appropriate.
And that certainly speaks to our hypersexualized culture here in America as well.
Yeah. We can't get out of that.
Mm-mm.
We can't say it's not appropriate for this situation, but it's appropriate for that situation.
That's the thing with both hypersexualization and hyperviolence. It's easier to sell to those people. And I think that's the crux of it. I think that's the core. I think you can really easily just manipulate people more when they're so caught up in both sex and violence. They're on that base level that they're just feeling that hunger. And what's different than that than going and wanting to buy electronics or going to buy this or that?
Well, as long as they like Chinese electronics. I'm going to run down to the John, and I'm going to talk about the Double in the Groove. I'll be right back.
Sounds good. I want to talk about some of the core values of socialism versus capitalism and just see where you come out and see where you think, if you are religious, that your religion comes out. Capitalism is the elevation of self above others, while socialism is the elevation of all simultaneously. It's that grand equalizer. It's that leveling of that playing field instead of that slippery slope on the way down that seems so endemic to capitalism. But of course, capitalism, some people have a few steps up to start. So they can just leap right over that slope and get to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. You have those sorts of handicaps. I mean, handicaps like a golf way built in, making it much easier for certain people to succeed. Next, capitalism plunders nature, while socialism strikes a balance. We talk a great deal on this show about being in the late stage of capitalism, or what is known as blood capitalism. The idea that to get that last bit of oil, you must shake the ground. To get that last bit of natural gas, you must shake the ground until the earth quakes. And you must drill deep below the ocean until those spills pollute that ocean. And truly, at this point, it's not worth it. We have renewable technology that can easily match or surpass what we create in renewable energy right now. That surpasses that, fossil fuel very easily. Finally, in capitalism, the voices of the rich are heard loudest, while in socialism, all voices are heard equally. You look back at the idealized version of your faith, what you want your faith to be. Which sounds more like it? Is it capitalism or is it socialism? It's pretty obvious to me.
Yeah. And we always benefit from other people's ideas. When we open a discussion and somebody says something, you say, "What? Oh yeah, how about that?" One of the best things I ever found out about starting a new relationship is it's like when I met Nadine, and we get together, and she brings a record collection, and I bring a record collection, and some of the records are the same. Sometimes a lot of them are the same. But then there's something here I never heard before. And something over there, wow, who is that artist?
Sure.
They bring a little bit different. to your life, and it improves the quality of your life when you listen to other people. And shops have been like that. You know, in Detroit, they used to have a. This goes back to, I guess, the 70s. It was called the Detroit Industrial Mission. And one of the things that they did was to try different things where people would all together work on, say, a big part of a car. And when they finished, they would initial it, you know. But they didn't do the same job every day, et cetera, et cetera. They all worked on that part of the car, and they all contributed to that part of the car.
Sure.
And it didn't slow down production, you know. And it gave them more job satisfaction.
And also a knowledge of how to do every task.
And how to do every task. I mean, it was just an improvement in the workplace, but Detroit never adopted it.
That's also a way that they're more difficult to fire.
Yeah.
If someone can do everything, then, you know, if a certain job is no longer needed, you can't just push them over to another job, because if you don't know how to do it, you don't. But if you do, you're fine.
Well, there was a time too, like if you go back to the 1890s and so forth, where that's the way shops were. I mean, you made a chair, you know, you made a table.
Sure.
Okay, but then they realized that in order to make a chair, you had to have a guy who had some skills to make a chair. Suppose I taught a guy to make a leg, and that's all he knew. And I taught another guy to make a seat. And I make another guy make a spoke. Then I could pay them all cheap.
But also, then one person could not go off and go into business for themselves.
No, and he's belittled. In terms of the greatness of his humanity, of his ability as a human being, he is belittled every day on the assembly line. You know, that's an 8-hour day. We were talking about history, and I wanted to bring. Go ahead.
Before you start, this is the next section, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna use the bathroom, so I'll be back. So
I'll start it.
All right.
Okay. We were talking about history. I thought that because I was the old guy, that the bladder, you know.
I don't know.
I guess a beer in, a beer out.
What they said.
There was a guy, he went there and he said, he just dumped the beer into the urinal. And the guy said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "I'm tired of being the middleman." And that's what we were experiencing. Okay. We're talking about history today. And I want to talk about America, Florida, 70 years ago. What happened this week is that the governor of Florida, the governor Ron DeSantis, he pardoned what is referred to as the Groveland Four. The Groveland Four were 4 black men called colored who were arrested and convicted of raping a 17-year-old white woman by the name of Norma Paget. And I will say right here at the top of the story, they were falsely accused. There's a very interesting book out if you would like to read the facts of this case, called The Devil in the Grove by Gilbert King. Let me tell you a little bit of this story. 1949, Groveland, Florida. Estranged husband, Willie Paget, convinces his estranged wife, Norma, to go out with him. And they go out and they drink presumably they had some fun, but they got into an altercation on the way home at the same time that they were having car trouble. Willie Pageant physically abused his wife, his estranged wife. But that, be that as it may, was not the problem. They had car trouble, as I said. And some black guys, three of them, they stopped by and they saw that they were having car trouble, and so they gave them a hand. They helped them. Norma, being thankful, offered one of them at least a drink of whiskey. At which point, Willie became extremely upset, and he called the man the N-word and some other epithets to indicate that he didn't like the idea of this gentleman drinking with his wife. The colored man did not particularly like being called an N-word and being called out of his name. And, you know, that's just the way things are. So he punched Willie, and they left. Well, Willie, wanting to get even, and certainly embarrassed by the fact that a colored man beat him up in front of his wife, told his wife that she was going to accuse these colored men, three of them, of kidnapping her and raping her, which she did. Why is it the Groveland Four? Is because there was an individual. Let me find out his name. Charlie Greenlee. He had come into town looking for work in the Orange Grove. He was a young man. And he was in a train station. And he loitered there because he didn't have a ride or a place to go. So they picked him up for loitering, took him to the police station. Obviously, he was in police custody. And it turns out that he was in police custody at the time of the incident that was alleged to have happened. Okay? But they accused him of it anyway. He didn't know the people, he didn't know the town, he didn't know anything, but they accused him of it anyway. Okay? Ernest Thomas, Walter Irving, and Sam Shepard. Excuse me, did I get them mixed up? Is it Sam Shepard? It was Sam Shepard who was the one who was in the train station, and Charles Greene, who was arrested for being at the scene. Walter Irving and Sam Shepard. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Sam Shepard. I did have it right. Sam Shepard, here's the thing. This is an interesting point. Walter Irving and Sam Shepard. These two young men were in World War II. This is 1949. They came home after fighting for their country. And they had the audacity. You know what they had the audacity to do? They had the audacity to walk around town in their uniform. Now, what this said to the white folks was, these are uppity colored folks trying to tell us that they deserve equal treatment just because they fought for us. They didn't like the idea of these colored people being uppity.
Well, how about they deserve equal treatment because they're equal people? Well, anyway.
Please. You know, so they were arrested for being of military descent.
Yeah.
Okay. And believe it or not, there was a trial. Okay. Let me say this, just so that you understand. We're talking about America. You read the book Lynchings and the Cross, and the lynching tree.
Cross and the lynching tree.
In 1946, you might read in it, there was a spat of lynchings. There were a lot of lynchings of soldiers who came back from the war. just to make sure that these colored people coming back from the war didn't get any idea that their situation had changed. It had to be made known right away, and these people had to be put right back into their place. This was the attitude of white America. And I'm not just talking about the South. I'm not just talking about the South when I talk about Negroes getting uppity because they fought in a war and not wanting to be just elevator operators anymore.
Yeah, God forbid.
Okay. Charles Greenlee had just arrived and looking for work. Now, Ernest Thomas, he wasn't at the scene, but he was a friend of those two uppity colored guys who walked around in uniform, so they picked him up too. Okay? Mm-hmm. They were convicted. Irving and Shepard were giving a death sentence. Greenlee, the one at the train station, he was given life because he was a minor. Now we're missing one, and that is because he escaped, right? While he's being watched by the guards, etc. You understand? He escaped. And so they had a 1,000-man posse go out and shoot him sleeping under a tree. And they filled his body full of bullets. Understand me, okay? They were led by a sheriff by the name of Willis McCall. Now, Willis McCall, you understand when we were talking about the prison system in America always being a private system and being a slave system, and the Orange Grove was a place where they put prisoners to work, and those prisoners, as the slaves, Willis McCall wanted to be the king of labor in the Groveland, you understand. The more colored people he put in jail, the more labor he had under his command.
Yep.
Okay? That was his purpose. Well, here's the crux of the story. It comes down to this. This goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says there should be another trial. There should be another trial because this thing was wrong. Mm-hmm. Okay? Thurgood Marshall is the lawyer. They go, Willis McCall. He says, I'm going to go pick up these two cowards, and I'm going to bring them back for trial. Okay? He goes to the jail to pick up these two colored men to bring them back to trial, and turns onto a side road and shoots them. He shot them. He assigned himself, you understand, to go and pick them up, drove off the main road onto a side road, you understand, and he shot them. Okay? Now let me make sure that I have these names right. Says that this one is still alive, Shepard. Irving died. He shot straight forward in the head. Shepard didn't die. He was handcuffed to Irving, but he played dead. He heard the sheriff get on the phone and call the deputy, say, come on back here, I'll just kill him. Deputy comes on back. He looks at him, he says, this one's still alive. So he shoots him. Shot him in the neck. And guess what? He still lived, playing dead. But because he lived, you understand, he was able to tell the FBI that he shot me again when I was laying in the ditch. So the FBI was able to go out to that ditch and find a bullet that had gone in his neck and exited and was in the dirt still, and it was the .38 caliber police bullet from the gun. Proof positive, you understand. that these guys had been shot by the sheriff and the sheriff deputy while handcuffed. This is 1951 now. The United States attorney recognized this, of course, since the FBI did the investigation and reported it to him. He also recognized that the medical examiner said that this woman was never raped and that evidence was never brought to the first trial.
Jeez.
Along with some other circumstances, like the whereabouts of these individuals, etc. The United States government, the United States attorney, in 1951 squashed the investigation of Willis McCall. Set it aside. Murder, when black lives even then did matter, you understand, here in America. Now the governor has come forward, and the governor says that the reputation of these two men were destroyed, not to mention their lives, of these these four men were destroyed. And he wants to set it right by pardoning them, and that he will come out later on with a full exoneration. I want to point out one other thing before I let the subject go. Gilbert King wrote another book. It's called Beneath a Ruthless Sky. And it's about a young lady, a reporter, named Mabel Norris Reese, who was also in Groveland, and she felt, after listening to the sheriff, etc., that she had been taken, because she wrote stories that gave the narrative of these ruthless, uneducated colored people raping this wonderful 17-year-old white woman.
Sure.
You know. And she realized the truth. And she started writing the truth. Well, they burned down her house and chased her out of town. And in the telling of her story, he writes, because she did a real good investigation on another story, which was also, and we're going to show you something interesting here, which was also a falsified rape. You know, they charged a retarded white man this time with raping a white woman who was a well-off woman in town. Now, the woman was raped. She was raped by a colored man. Isn't that interesting? They didn't charge the colored man, because the husband came to the defense of his wife, and the colored man beat the heck out of him. And he was too embarrassed to tell that a Negro had beat him up, that he had them arrest a retarded white man and accuse him of the crime. Huh. Now, I'm talking about America.
Yeah.
I'm talking about America.
True.
And I'm not talking about America. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all that much changed. I'm reminded of, I saw the movie Mississippi Burning, and Gene Hackman, he plays one of the FBI agents who's trying to track down these white men who killed these 3 civil rights workers. And he says to the other FBI guy, he says his daddy was a tenant farmer. And he lived down the road from a colored guy who was also a tenant farmer. But this guy was doing better than his father. And he was able to go out and buy himself a mule. And with that mule, of course, he was able to do twice as much, 3 times as much work. And he was able to rent another piece of land. He said, well, one morning that mule turned up dead. That mule turned up poisoned. And he was riding by the place, and the colored guy had left, and he looked at his father, and his father said, son, if you can't be better than, and he used the N-word, then what good are you? You know, the way I always say, at least you're not
Yep.
black.
Yeah.
You
No,
know?
you do. Yeah.
You know, that this syndrome still exists. This syndrome is still here.
Of course.
This syndrome is still a big part of what America is. That a man has to show himself to be better than the men around him, and a white man is better than everybody around him. A white woman, colored man,
Sure.
whoever it is. And if you can't be better than a colored man,
Well, good are you?
what? You know. So,
Come on now.
we've come 70 years, ladies and gentlemen. I have a story here about a couple of kids named Ukiah Swain is the mother of 4 teenage boys who were harassed by a manager at a Kroger grocery store in Mesquite, Texas last week. She told the Dallas-Fort Worth police station, or a radio station, a television station, that the manager at the store called the police on her teenage son after they purchased snacks at the store.
Wow.
What did he call him for? For shoplifting. Why did the manager single out black male teens according to a 16-year-old boy? The manager told him, "We had problems with people like you before." We're talking about America in 2019. These kids paid for their stuff
And then proved it.
and then proved that they paid for it. And they were accused of shoplifting. And guess what? When the police arrived, the teens produced the receipts for their purchases, freshly printed, but they still received a trespassing warning. They were charged with trespassing. This means that for 1 year, any one of those kids could be arrested at the discretion of either the manager or the police if they step inside a Kroger. This is America in 2019. If you can't be better than a colored, what good are you? I'm just a damn Kroger clerk. I'm dissatisfied with my status in life. I went to college or whatever it is that I did, and this is as far as I could go because of this economy. And here comes these colored kids in here with purchasing power.
They're buying snacks. I mean, come on. I don't think they're rich, but even if they were, good for them.
Hey, you understand where this comes from? You know, this is not a socialism statement. Socialism means that people are equal in seeing each other. Capitalism allows for you to be better than the others by your status, by your money, by whatever, you know, material that we deduce gives us status. You know, these kids came into the store with some status according to that definition. They had purchasing power. They were equal to the store clerk.
Good for them. Hey, good for them. Of course, not everyone sees it that way.
No, see, we had trouble with people like you before.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
What do you mean, you people?
Well, you know you people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What time is it?
Yeah, we got like 15 minutes.
Okay.
So we can hop to the shutdown for a minute. Cause
The shutdown.
it's
You mean
now-
the government?
yeah, it's now day 28. The longest government shutdown in U.S. history that shows very little sign of ending. Although, rumor has it that Trump will propose extensions to DACA if they build him his wall.
Actually, Trump had made a couple of times gave his signals that he would be making concessions if they would talk, and Pelosi and Schumer, they didn't want to talk. And this is the point. Again, we're coming around to politics. You know, we would rather have the Republicans take the responsibility for this shutdown so that we could gain as Democrats than to see the country run.
There is something, though, about taking a strong stance against building a $5.7 billion wall.
Well, look, now, I agree with that. But I don't agree with it when you built 700 miles of it already now, and you didn't argue about it during the Obama administration. Now all of a sudden, during the Clinton
Oh, the
administration,
Clintons loved it. They're all
okay,
about it.
now let's not go there as if this is all of a sudden like a moral dilemma that we're in that we never faced before, and we didn't resolve before because we resolved it by building 700 feet, 700 miles of wall.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're saying is if it's a new thing, it's not a new thing. Now, I don't agree with Trump. Understand me. I don't agree that you should hold the American people to hostage to building a wall, and I don't agree that a wall in any way is the solution to immigration problem and a lack of immigration policy. But I accuse the whole government of that. You understand? And look, if you're going to go to a meeting about the wall, let's talk about the wall.
Yeah, they did.
You know, if you're going to talk about and negotiate, let's go negotiate. But let's not hold out for political purposes on both sides now. And that beer is doing it to me again. On both sides.
Well, my bad. So, just to speak on this shutdown a moment, we are now at day 28, which makes this the longest government shutdown in American history. Of course, it's the social safety net that is being shut down. It is not the police, the fire department, certainly not the military, and not the IRS, although the people who actually work as customer service for the IRS and to help people settle disputes, they are actually not working. So people who are in debate about, say, having their property seized, that process is still ongoing. And by the time everything gets back going, that property may just be gone. I've heard several examples of this, that people kept trying to continue their negotiations with the IRS during this time and couldn't reach anyone, but kept receiving these automated messages that their property would be seized at a certain time. So what all this says to me is this is a very, very carefully created and designed setup. It is once again, as we have seen so many times in this administration, just a grab for cash, just a quest to privatize, to take property and wealth out of the hands of the individual and into either the state or corporations. It's a Ponzi scheme. And that's unfortunate. And apparently it leads to our beloved President Trump ordering $10,000 worth of fast food to serve to the National College Football Champion Clemson Tigers, because I know that, top sportsmen of their time are really fueled best by McDonald's and Wendy's. That is truly their power fuel.
Well, it's
theater.
That's all of it. Yeah, exactly. We need to get off of the trivial politics that we're playing.
This one's fun. This is kind of funny, though.
I agree. I mean, if we wanted to look at it as being funny and play a joke, but we're treating these things serious.
Yeah.
We're coming on with this story leading the news. Here we have this story right now where what's his name, Cohen. You know this one. He apparently the president told him to lie.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell another story about it.
Go ahead. What's that one?
No, you can do yours first. This one's funny.
The story is that the president told him to lie to Congress about Russia. And the story is published from anonymous sources. And with a so-called journalist who's been caught up in false stories before, with no evidence or documents or anything to back up anything that is said in the story. Yet, the headlines are the president to be impeached for telling Cohen to lie. It doesn't in any way indicate that we don't know anything about this story being true or not true. That Cohen has been caught up in so many lies in his life that, and certainly recently,
that part's true. That is accurate.
That he is under pressure to produce for people who are trying to impeach or cause harm, and that these stories are written without sources, documents, or as a matter of fact, there were two journalists, so-called, on this story. One who said that they never saw any sources, and the other one who said that they did.
Interesting. It's very interesting.
Okay, but the headlines, you see, is that this is going to impeachment. What I'm trying to say here is that the politics, and we said that at the beginning of the year, is so bent on impeachment. We're into a period of impeachment politics that no matter what we find, we're going to impeach. And it's purely on the basis of dislike of an individual and the politics involved around that. Now, I don't like this guy. This guy is president. He don't have to be president because we have a system that removes him from being president. It's called the election.
That's in 4 years, though.
That's in 2 years.
Okay, from now, sure.
From now. Unless you have read the Constitution, what it takes for impeachment. We're not talking about politically because you don't like somebody. We're talking about what he has to do. Now, I'm going to make a suggestion to the Democrats and to Congress. Do your job. Pass the bills that need to be passed. The bills originate in the House. They don't originate with the president. Stop treating the president like he's an imperial president. He is not.
Yes, pass the bills you need to pass.
That's right.
But then
challenge him. Put it out there. Stand up to him. That's right. That's the way it used to work in the past. We had vetoes and we had overriding of vetoes. We had people standing up and fighting for what they believed should be not what they thought could get passed. We need to go back to that. We need to go back to a Congress that is in charge. Read the Constitution. It doesn't say we have an imperial presidency. It doesn't say we have a dictatorship. It doesn't say that you only pass those bills that the president's going to like. It says you stand up on your grounds representing the people to pass those laws that you know are right, and you challenge the president if he's wrong. That's how you challenge the president, by doing your job, not by playing petty politics about a piece of cake or a hamburger. How much chocolate cake he ate. Remember that one?
Does he eat his steak with ketchup?
Right. I mean...
So, yes, unless one specifically got into the presidency to set up a system of grift in order to make billions of dollars.
Every president has made billions of dollars. Don't tell me no crap like that.
Directly from the president.
Yeah, every one of them. Every one of them. Come on. Right now, Obama is making dollars a pop for giving speeches. You think that's not because he's getting paid for being president and what he did for Wall Street?
No, I don't know.
You don't know? Come on, please. This is how the system works.
Every politician makes big money on the speech circuit after.
No, wait a minute.
And you're saying that is direct payment for doing things that
I'm saying exactly that. That's why I'm doing it. There are a lot of ways that presidents make a lot of money. There are a lot of ways presidents make a lot of money. Are you kidding me? There's no man who's gone into the White House who's come out poor.
And no one wants to give this dude $400,000 to have to
nobody.
Speak.
What I'm saying is that I don't think he should make money off the presidency. I don't think that he should have grift off the presidency. But I believe that about every president. You understand?
Yeah.
I believe it about every president. Don't act as if we're talking about something that is unique to this individual and he's therefore uniquely bad. I'm sorry. Every president that I've known in my lifetime has called me the N-word. Maybe with the exception of Obama. Maybe.
Yeah.
Every president that I've known in my lifetime has been racist.
Even Bill Clinton? I thought he was the first black president.